Welcome to Lynn's Romance Reads. I'm Lynn, and this is my September wrap-up. So, this was kind of a slumpy month. I was just kind of not excited about some of the books that I picked up, or they didn't land like I was hoping them to. So it's a bit of a bummer, but we'll talk about it. So first off, I had one 6-star read, so I'll be excited to talk about that, but everything else felt a little flat. I had 3 5 stars, 4 4.5 stars, some of those lower than others, 2 4 stars, and 2 3.5 stars. So that's pretty bad for me. I normally don't have something as low as a 3.5 star in a normal month. Of those, I had 3 dark romance or mafia / MC. I had 2 alien or sci-fi, and then 5 paranormal and 2 historical. So I had a pretty big mix of things. I also kept track of contemporary, but if it was like a paranormal or sci-fi that took place in a contemporary setting, I also counted it for that. So it's not like a true contemporary romance, it's just what's taking place in a modern time. So I had approximately 10 contemporaries marked. So that's kind of the stats part. So I have Goodreads down here on my computer, so I'll be referencing from there, and I'll be talking about the books that I read first in the month, moving towards the things that I finished most recently. So the first book I read was Saving Verrako. This is book 3 in the Collections by Victoria Aveline. The first book, Choosing Theo, was amazing. I got that recommendation from, I believe, Jessin Reads Romance and Ava's Romance Books. Both of them have read it and really enjoyed it. I'm not sure Jessin moved forward, but Avery has, and so I've really enjoyed. I've moved forward. I gave this 4 star, or I gave it 5 stars, and I think it's a true 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's a fated mates, kind of friends to lovers story, and I really enjoyed it. And so Saving Verrako, I believe, was also on one of my TBRs, so it's been very fun. The premise of Saving Verrako, I believe I've talked about it, but our hero, Verrako, ends up injured and almost kidnapped by evil aliens and ends up falling from the sky and landing in our heroine's camp. And they work together, surviving in the forest and making their way to civilization. So it was very fun, very cute. It's a delight. It's not anything great or fancy in literature, but it was what I wanted to read at the time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I will probably be moving on to book 4 this month. Then I read Parental Guidance by Avery Flynn. This I read as an audiobook, and I believe I gave it 5 stars as well. So it was a perfectly enjoyable sports romance. Our hero has gotten into a little bit of PR trouble and has been enlisted into this dating program where his mom picks out potential dates. He has to go on 5 of them and do news related things at the end of each date, and he ends up getting paired with our heroine, who is a feisty little redhead who has been also cajoled into doing this to help her father and her best friend. And so she has decided to do this, and they originally start to just be like, let's just leave it at this. We'll do this pairing. We'll go through our 5 dates and call it done. And it goes from a friends to lovers story from there, starting from a fake dating situation. There is a lot of meddling family and friends in this because obviously the parents are involved in the dating process, and our heroine also has a very fun friend that kind of inputs her 2 cents into different things. And so it was a perfectly enjoyable read. Again, I think this was a true 5 stars. I have it in Goodreads pulled up, so I can't tell which ones I gave half stars unless I specifically remember. Okay. Next is The Taming of a Highlander by Elisa Braden. This was one of my historical reads. This is following our hero Broderick, who has been wrongfully imprisoned and has been gravely injured. And he's finally starting to kind of get back into his full strength and come to terms with the injuries that he's had. He lost his eye, and some other things happened while he was falsely imprisoned. And our heroine, or let me back up, Broderick has been on a revenge kick, and he's finally caught his prey, the man who falsely imprisoned him. And Kate is in town visiting her brother, who is the hero from book 1, and she stumbles on Broderick exacting his revenge, and is terrified by this beastly man that is attacking another man. And so she runs screaming for her family and ends up terrified of Broderick. But as she learns more of his situation and what was happening, she's like, well, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was. And she ends up agreeing to have a marriage of convenience with Broderick so that she doesn't have to testify against him to the constable that's investigating the situation. Okay, and I believe that was another full 5-star read. So I got my full 5 stars out early in the month, and I was feeling good, and then it kind of hit the rails. The next one is Cowboy Wolf Trouble by Kate Ballenger. This I rated 4 stars, and I think that was a true 4 stars. This is a wolf shifter romance, werewolf, wolf shifter. Our hero has been estranged from a pack that his family had started. He walked away hoping that the pack would get on the straight and narrow when he left. And he joined the neighboring pack, which was the more established and, I hate to say, proper pack. And so he's still on uneven footing with his new pack. They don't exactly trust him. And he sneaks out to meet with an informant who works with the old pack, and it ends up being a trap. He gets out, but in the process, he wanders, or he's crossing through a neighboring farm's land and gets stuck in a wolf trap. And the heroine of this story owns the farm and is properly bewildered when the wolf that she has caught in her trap, that she's trying to figure out what to do with because her brother set the trap without her knowledge, turns into a man and frees himself. She ends up shooting him with a shotgun and then promptly passes out and hits her head. And they end up kind of in a forced proximity situation because humans aren't supposed to know that wolf shifters exist, and it goes from there. It was perfectly enjoyable. It was a little flat. I'm not sure if I'll move forward in the series. As of right now, it's not super urgent, but it might be something if I'm feeling slumpy, I could pick up the next book in the series. Then after that, I read Transcendence by Shay Savage. This was my 6-star read. So I heard everyone talking about Transcendence about, well, I don't know when it went through BookTube the first time, but I found Justin Reed's romance about last winter, almost a year ago, and I watched all of her videos because I loved how she talked about books. I loved her recommendations. And I thought that our tastes aligned very much. So Justin became one of my favorite booktubers. I have since expanded my repertoire and I have other favorites, but I watched all her videos and Transcendence popped up as a top read for her. And I finally figured out Hoopla with my public library, and they had Transcendence as an audiobook, and I loved it. So it was so sweet. He's such a cinnamon roll, but it's the thing that really made it a 6-star read was the mastery that Shay Savage had with how she conveyed this caveman's emotions and thought process. It was, I can't even begin to think how she wrote it and how she figured out how to communicate all these things with like a limited vocabulary and a limited understanding of the world. and we never see our heroine's point of view, and it was just amazing. So top favorite. I can't believe that this was the book that everyone was talking about. I loved it. So anyway, the premise is our heroine ends up getting taken back into time. We don't know fully how. It ends up being kind of a science-based time travel experience once we read the epilogue, but she ends up back in time, and our hero he's Ed, he finds her in one of his traps when he goes to retrieve a spear after hunting an antelope or something of a sorts. And so he's so excited because he finally got a mate, and he was so alone, and he was really like not taking care of himself because he lost his tribe and he wasn't able to join another tribe, and he was just alone, and he had kind of like lost the desire to take care of himself to the degree that he should have. And Beth is just a light to him, and he goes through the entire book trying to figure out how to woo her and how to build a life with her, and she's trying to adjust to being in the times that she is. It was amazing. It was so swoon worthy. I finished that book and I was just like, how? It was amazing. So obviously going into my next book, it was gonna have some thoughts. So after that, I was the Twisted and Taboo readathon. I was on the fence on participating, but I had a couple books that were kind of on my radar that were taboo. And so I read Kings of Kearney by Navessa Allen. This is an MC romance where our heroine, all of the MC members are veterans. There are female and male members, and there's some of the, there's not the cultural degradation of women. So those were all plus marks, and that's what I had heard from, I believe, Jessen from Jessen Reads Romance has read it. I believe Jen from the Book Refuge, and then Tiffany from Tiff Talks Pages also read it during the readathon as well. So for me, this was a 4.5 star rounded down to 4 in Goodreads. And the premise is that our hero and heroine have kind of been circling each other. They both find the other attractive. And our heroine ends up getting roped into this plot to figure out what's happening at the nursing home that her grandma is at. There are rumors that medication is getting swapped out and used for an illegal drug trade. And so she ends up being willing to help out. And so overall, I think what really didn't work for me, and I think I've talked about this, is it was a very political maneuvering type romance. There was a big focus on the politics of the MC, and our heroine always felt on the outside. And I don't like that. I want our heroine, even though she is, quote, on the outside, to have the trust and understanding of our hero throughout the entire book. And he really metered what information she received, as well as there was a lot of political maneuvering. And I don't like that in my books. So it was an okay read. I didn't particularly enjoy it. I did like the couple of aspects of the MC world that were different than typical MC club romances. And then from there, I read Nikki the Driver by Kate C. Wells. This was also another 4.5 star rounded down to 4 on Goodreads. So this was a highly anticipated book. If you've read or watched some of my previous videos, whenever I talked about books that I'm very excited about, I talked about Nikki the Driver because this is the sequel or companion to Run Posey Run. I will say the triggers for this are serious. I have some posted. They might not be sufficient. Check your triggers and content warnings. But it was a hard read. I finished Nikki the Driver, and I just felt disappointed in the things that were being shown in the story. I think one big factor is that our heroine had a lot of trauma and a lot of struggles with disordered eating and disordered exercise that really became a big focus of the book. And I appreciate Kate C. Wells for having that representation and having a heroine that was really struggling. It took away from the relationship between her and Nicky. Additionally, there was a lot of political maneuvering, and our heroine didn't understand the power that she had being Nicky's everything, because Nicky was so focused on her, and he was basically stalking her for years, and it didn't work. It just didn't work. Realistically, it was probably a 4-star read, not a 4.5 star, but I gave it some grace because it was Kate C. Wells. Okay. From there, I read Wolf Marked by Veronica Douglas. This is I believe a husband and wife writing duo. I was scrolling through Kindle recommendations, and I was kind of wanting a shifter romance, kind of in the mood for spooky season, and I wasn't finding something on my TBR that I was really wanting to pick up. And so I saw the bio for this, and I thought that the premise sounded very interesting. Overall, like, I had issues with our hero's stubbornness. Our heroine kind of was a little, not majorly, but a little bit too stupid to live, and she kind of played the middle ground too much. It was very forgettable. It was 4 stars. Again, I'm not sure if I would move forward with this, similar to the Cowboy book by Kate Ballenger. It was an okay paranormal. I was really hoping for something more because I was really wanting a good paranormal read. Then from there, I started 99% Mine on audio. This is by Sally Thorne, the author of The Hating Game. I have never heard as great of things about this compared to The Hating Game, obviously. But I wanted to pick up an audiobook, and I normally pick up contemporaries, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. It's a 4 on Goodreads, but it's 3.5, maybe a 3, but we'll stick with 3.5. And in this, I had issues with a lot of it. First of all, our heroine is highly unlikable. She runs away from problems traveling the world, and she really disregards her health. She has a major heart condition that she's not been taken care of, and she's basically pushed away all of her family and is on an island by herself, and she's wrapped herself up with this coat of like sarcasm and like trying to keep everyone's at arm's length. And then their adopted sibling, or her brother's best friend, comes back into town and is helping her remodel her family's house, and she's like in love with him, and her character felt very disjointed, and I didn't understand her motivations. I didn't understand her. She was very manipulative. She took advantage of the hero, Tom, throughout the book, messed with his head, and then was like upset when he had enough of her and her brothers manipulating of him and disregarding his opinion and making him do everything. It was just, I did not enjoy it. I did not jive with it. I listened to the Smart Woman Read Romance podcast episode about this, and it was a very interesting because they noticed a lot of the same things I did, but they interpreted it very differently. And so anyway, I strongly disliked this as a contemporary romance and didn't get it. Then I read Pen Pal by J.T. Geissinger, and it was very interesting to read it because I've heard all of the drama around Pen Pal, and I wanted to wait for a little bit of it to die down, but I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, rounded down to 3 on Goodreads. And I think the biggest thing is it was a muddled story. It was a muddled story. JT wrote it expecting it to be a romance, I think. And then with how it ended, the HEA is questionable. That should be well established. The HEA was questionable. I think it as an HEA is fine for my opinion, but the HEA was questionable across the board. And so she had to pivot her marketing to put it as a psychological thriller. And I'll say it didn't hit the mark on either category for me. It's been a while, but I have read thrillers. I read Gone Girl. I thought that was very captivating. I was trying to figure out what was happening. I really enjoyed it. That was about 3 years ago I read Gone Girl. And I've read other thrillers. So like I've read thrillers. I don't read them regularly, but I have read them. And I think overall the thriller or the titillation aspect of this story was not there. I mean, we have her in the house and we have all these spooky things happening, and it's pretty expected. I wasn't scared of the things that were happening. I wasn't interested in the thriller aspects. And then you have kind of the romance aspects, and it's told with an interesting timeline and an interesting point of view. We have an unreliable narrator. So that does take into is a portion of it. But we have a relationship between our heroine and our hero, Aiden. And basically, I didn't have any chemistry between them. They had sex. They had lots of sex and a lot of kinky sex, but there was no emotional connection conveyed about them as two people. So as a romance, like, we expect it to be an HEA, but the point of the story is to tell how they are as a couple and how they get together and how they overcome adversity and end up with an HEA. So I missed that, the beginning part of the story. There was an HEA in my opinion, but because the rest of the story wasn't about their romance, it wasn't a romance book. And then because it wasn't titillating as a thriller, it wasn't a thriller. So it was flat. I didn't really enjoy it. I could have walked away from it at any point, but I didn't really DNF it because I wanted to find out how it ended, as well as how participate in the discussion about it. I don't appreciate what JT did with mental illness representation, and I think a lot of people had issues with the triggers. If you're curious, you can message me on Instagram. I'll talk about it, but it didn't work for me. Did not work for me. So after that, I really needed a fluffy read. So I picked up Love Sucks, book 2 in Cynthia St. Aubin's Werewolf Art Gallery series. So this is a series that covers 3 books. So book 1 didn't end on an HEA, but our heroine is highly snarky. I love her as a character. The first book didn't land super well for me. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. There was a couple of choices that the author made that I didn't love. Moving on to the second book, I found there was some of those same mistakes, but overall I enjoyed it much more, but it was still a 4.5 star read. Some more aspects that were brought in, some of the more of the lore was built up with our how mating works in this paranormal world. In this world, it's not a fated mate per se, but if 2 werewolves have sex together, then they are mated for life. And so we kind of get some perspective on why our hero has been keeping our heroine at arm's length, because we know that she's not ready to be in a mated situation. And there's still some other things with the Detective Morrison going on, and there's some mystery / suspense elements. It was really great. The reason it was 4.5 stars wasn't anything to do with the characters themselves. It had to do with the fact that the ending was just rushed. I read the last couple of chapters, maybe the last hour and a half of the audiobook. It felt like it just went from thing to thing to thing. And we never really got to see everything like wrapped up super well. And it ended with a pretty big bomb that hadn't been really hinted at and didn't make sense as the like cliffhanger moving into book 3. But I will probably still pick up the 3rd book in October. So the last book is A Nurse for the Wolfman by Eve Langlais. I think that's how you say it. So our hero Luke was a soldier in the army, and he is gravely injured and has really been disheartened by his injury and has started drug and alcohol use in an unhealthy manner. And he gets approached by this doctor, part of this medical group that we already have our hackles raised about, that basically says, we'll heal you, no questions, like you just have to sign here and we get to do whatever to heal you. And Luke gets enrolled in this secretive, illegal, experimental medicine group. And so he starts getting experimented on, and then we are from our heroine's point of view, and our heroine has been recruited as a nurse to work for this institution. And she starts out just treating coma patients who she doesn't understand why they're in comas, and she kind of is questioning things and is uncertain about how everything's happening. And she then gets transferred to be Luke's personal nurse because she is snarky and gets responses from him. And basically they end up in a romance together. There is a little bit of taboo because it's a nurse-patient relationship. And then there's also the suspense element of this experimentation facility and this medical practice. There is content warnings for violence, assault by creatures, and unwilling experimentation. And so anyway, the book, it quickly becomes about how do we escape. And this was 4.5 stars, and my biggest issue with this was the epilogue. There is kind of like this great closed arc, loved it, and then there was a little aspect of the epilogue that it didn't work for me. I have a spoiler in my Goodreads review if you want to find out what happened in the epilogue that I didn't like, but I will probably move forward because the next book covers heroine that we've met. And looking at the titles of the next couple books, it looks like there might be an overarching plot arc that is the reason why she had that little aspect in the... So that is my September wrap up. I read 12 books. As I said, I started off fairly strong, and then I kind of had a bit of a dud at the duds as it went on, but I am happy with it. And so thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe so you can see other videos that I make. I try and post about once a week, maybe a little less than that, but please like and comment. I'd love to have a chat with you. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.